Welcome everybody to the Wellspring Digital Marketing Chat. We are super lucky to have my buddy Mathew Sweezey with us. He just wrote a book. Say hi, Matthew.
Hey, everybody.
He just wrote a book called Context Marketing Revolution, and I think it's one of the best marketing books out there. I think it's, and I'm not just saying that because he's on the line. So I really feel like people should pick this one up. But we'll get a little bit more into that in a second. I wanted to give you, Matthew, a chance to introduce yourself and tell people what you've been up to and what your background is and whatever else you feel.
Yeah, so I guess what you should know about me is what I do. So I work for a company called Salesforce. Probably heard of us. If you haven't,
so. Yeah.
There you go. You learned something new today.
Little company called Salesforce, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm director of market strategy, and what that means is I really focus on a POV. So I own a point of view, and I own the POV for future of marketing. So what that means is I do a lot of research work with our research teams, trying to understand what that research is, help analyze what we're going to look at, and then help bring those insights back out to the marketplace, as well as then conversely working with the marketplace and bringing those insights back inside. So it's really kind of what I focus on.
Okay, great. So I just finished your book a little while ago, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And like I said, I think it's one of the most important marketing books out there today. I think anyone that's in marketing or any business owners out there should really pick this book up. I'll put a link below in the transcript section. But normally I would ask you a broad range of questions just because I know you have a vast marketing knowledge, but I really want to focus on this book because I do think it's that important. So
Cool.
So I'll just jump right in. So I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy, which I printed out, and I was finding myself highlighting seems like every other paragraph. There's just so much good stuff in there. One paragraph that I just basically just circled was about people's mistrust of advertising. Can you speak to that a little further and maybe talk a bit about what's working instead of just straight advertising?
Yeah, so I mean, to try to kind of give a simple answer is, if one of the main goals of our profession and the role of advertising and marketing is to build trust with a marketplace, right? Well, then let's look at how trusted are those professions. And so when we look at, Gallup does a trust barometer every year, and they look at, I think that's who it comes out from. I have to double check the research. Anyways, the question is, what are the most distrusted and most trusted professions, right? The number one most trusted profession over the past 5 years is pretty consistent, and that's nurses, right? Nurses have been the most trusted profession.
Oh, most trusted. Okay, yeah.
Most trusted profession. And then when we look at the opposite end of the spectrum, one of the most distrusted, I think a lot of us know probably what the most distrusted are, right? It's going to be one of three, and it usually alternates between Congress, between used car salespeople, and between there's lawyers.
Right.
But what's most interesting is what is only 1 percentage point difference, right? What's the next most distrusted after those three? And it's advertising and marketing professionals. So we must ask ourselves, if our role is to create things that are trusted, why are we so distrusted as a profession?
Right.
And so I think that's one of the big things. And so it's like, all right, and the reason why is because the way that we've constructed this game that we play is that we force messages onto people and expect them to do whatever we say, right? And as anyone that has children knows, that's a horrible methodology of how we get people to do things that we want them to do.
Right.
So the alternate is this idea that I write about called context marketing, which is essentially 2 steps. One is, the most core basic concept is focus on the goals that people have in specific moments and help them accomplish those goals in those moments, right? And then the second is to apply that theory across an entire life cycle of engagements, right? So I think it's the 2-step, right? And so why this is radically different is, one is we're looking at motivation not in how do I create one thing that motivates you to do the thing I want you to do, but rather breaking the concept down and realizing that motivation is really a string of lots of moments.
Right.
And how we motivate people best is we break through by helping them accomplish a goal in one of those points in time. And then we leverage that trust to get them to the next spot. And so we guide them, right? And if we mathematically just think about this from a math problem, and we say, well, what if there are just 4 spots on a journey, right? And what if we just simply increase the efficiency of people moving from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4 by just simply 1% across each of those? That's a 40% net lift on the back end, right? So if we can just, so it's like, if we just think about these things in different ways, we get to radically different games, and that essentially that the theory is what I call context marketing.
Okay. And so that kind of leads into my next question, which is, everybody, we've been talking about agile marketing for a while in our world, but I think it's, agile development's been around for years. And you talk a lot in your book about agile marketing. And my fear with that is that so many people won't really truly understand what that means. And I think that's why it's so important to read your book, because I think people think they know what agile marketing is, but maybe they don't quite have it all. So I wanted to give you a chance to tell us what agile marketing really is and why you think it's so important, especially considering what you were talking about hitting people along the journey.
Yeah, so I'm going to take one step back and tell you something that I didn't tell you I probably should have. So a lot of these theories and ideas are founded in research. It's not that I say I think we should do these things. I've spent the past 4 years looking at about 16,000 global brands and identifying the key traits of high performers and looked at what they've done, right? The number one key trait of a high-performing marketing organization is executive buy-in to a new idea of marketing.
Right.
And that's where they shift from marketing's role is to simply create messages to force into the marketplace to where they focus on crafting and connecting experiences across the journey, right? So that's the baseline. Right. One of the other key traits that high performers all exhibit is they operate in agile methodologies, right? And it's critically important for a couple of basic reasons, right? And let's just take a couple of basic scenarios. One, we live in a world of infinite content, right? So for us as brands, and I don't care what brand you are, you must realize that your customers, their normal pace of content is rapidly unlike anything they've ever experienced before, right? So if we want to think about this from a business standpoint, think about fast fashion. Right? Okay. There was, a few years ago, there were 4 seasons. Now there are 52 seasons of fashion, right? Yeah. How many seasons do you have in advertising, right? Just think about this as your own business, right? If you were to break your advertising and marketing strategy down, you probably bake them out into campaigns and say, we're going to push this campaign out for these 3 months. There's going to be this campaign. But then we flip the script and looked at it from the consumer side and say, you're essentially going to say the same thing to me for 3 months. And you're not even going to realize the fact that my friends say a different thing to me every 5 minutes. Right. So that's not even matching the context or the pace of the environment. Right. So for us to meet that pace, we're going to have to change the way that we think about working. Right. So the whole underlying premise of my book is not to say, take your idea that you have of marketing and apply context to it. That's the wrong thing. What I'm saying is the idea that you have was created for a different time and place. Give it up, look at the new environment, and embrace something new, right? And what that is and from a business standpoint, we talk about digital transformation. That is what digital transformation is from a high-level business strategy. Right. Give up what you think you were supposed to be doing and redo it. Well, this is marketing transformation, and a part of that is the way that we do the work, right? There is just simply no way for us to create the amount of work that we're going to have to create without doing agile flows. The other aspect is we're not going to get it to the level that it's needed to get if we don't follow agile methodologies as well. Here's just a really simple aspect. Agile is an iterative process. A major part of that process is review, right? So let's just play this simple game, right? We know asking people is a good thing. We know reviewing and iterating is a good thing. Everyone knows that even if you don't follow agile practices. But how well do we operationalize that, right? So we all know those things to be true. Now ask yourself this question. When was the last time you picked up the telephone and called somebody who engaged with your content, watched a video, downloaded a piece of content, and asked them this question? Did it meet the expectations that you had of that moment, right? Because here's what we do. We see they watched the video. Great. They had a download. Great. We assume that's a positive, but we're not actually following up. And the reality is that I've done the research, and many of the times it's actually a negative. If we
Okay.
don't review those things, right? This is a review. If we don't review and then iterate and make something new and better, we're going to be constantly driving other people into an experience that could be a bad one, right? And so that's, the two aspects we need to think about of Agile. One is a new way of working to create enough content, and two is to create it at a high enough value. And we can only do that through an iterative process.
Right.
And I think there's a phenomenal story. I'm sorry, John, for just talking and rambling.
No, this is great. Keep talking.
But I think this was someone shared this story with me, and I'm sure some of you may have heard this story before. If not, it's going to be a new one. But it's the art teacher in the vase, right? This art teacher comes in, he takes his class, and he says, "All right, class," he says, "I'm going to divide you in half. Group A, you go home, come back tomorrow. Group B, I'm going to give you a task. You go home, and you don't come back into the last day of class. And your only task is to make the perfect vase, right? So leave here, go make the perfect vase, come back, and we're going to have a show." Group A, it's the next day. Group A comes back, and he says, "All right, every day we're going to make a vase. The goal is not perfection. The goal is production. You're going to make a vase every day." At the end, they have an art show. The best vases come from the people that made a vase every day, right? And it's the iterative process of constantly working and improving rather than taking all your time and focus to make something perfect and then launching it. It's the concept of working with the marketplace to co-create this in the end. So, all right, I'm going to stop and turn it back over.
No, that's great, because that is how so many marketing departments handle marketing. They get a budget and they get an assignment and they go off and do their thing and assume everything's great, and it's just old hat, and it's not working. So that's a fantastic story. That helps break it down for sure. Well, you kind of gave the segue here, so let's talk a little bit about the buy-in from the C-suite, because what you're talking about is a pretty heavy lift, and it's a pretty radical change that people will need to undertake in their organizations. And as we all know, the only way to get those things to happen is to get the buy-in from the leadership. And I thought the way that you described getting executive buy-in was pretty brilliant. So I wanted to, without giving away too much of the farm, see if you can kind of describe that a little bit for the viewers.
Yeah. So essentially, it's a big complex problem that we have. Right. And it's getting executives to change the way that they really think about marketing. Right. That's not an easy thing. And we're all on different points in time on this. Right. Like I said, high performers are already there. That's 16% of businesses are already there. Right. That's 84% of us left that we're talking about. Now, then there's going to be the laggards. There's going to be people that are just completely laggards. You're never going to do what they're going to do. The sad part is they're not going to be around in 5 to 10 years. Right. So that's just, let's not worry about them. Right. Then there's the middle group of us. And what we need to think about is there's two things going on. One is we're just simply going to need to take one step forward. We're not going to fully transcend and really radicalize, undo everything like those other high performers, right? We're just not, it's just not our operational model. So there's a couple of things we can do. One is we can get a high paid consultant, right? If your executive pays somebody, they trust those ideas, right? It's very rare that they trust ideas from us at this level. You may have heard the term, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. And it's very true, right? So outside sources, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book, was to help you have those outside sources that you could provide, right? Harvard Business Review usually carries a lot of weight with executives, so it's, it should give you some validation. The other is this concept of a stretch budget, right? It's this concept of, well, we can test ideas. And if we test ideas, we can improve via data that these things work, and then we can roll them and scale them up over time. And so that's what I suggest for most people to think about is to create a stretch budget, which is essentially a small portion of your overall budget, which happens. And here's the things we need to think about. One is this is a conversation that has to happen before you need the money, right? And I say, if you've ever gotten a line of credit from a bank, think about this as the exact same process. One is you have to have all the terms and conditions and paperwork signed well before you need the money. Right? So you need to go to your bosses today and say, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a stretch budget program, right? We're going to set aside an amount of money, that doesn't matter how much, and we're not going to be allowed access to that money unless we hit certain criteria. And those criteria are the following. We have hit a stretch goal, right? So you could say, all right, I've got a webinar and my goal is 500. A stretch goal would be anything, and you just make up numbers. It could be 25%, 50%,
Right.
double of whatever your goal is, right? That's part of the conversation that you negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
Once you hit that, you've done something different, right? You didn't do the same thing to get a new result. You did something different to get that new result. That may have been a new tool that you used. That may have been a new technique that you may have used. That may have been whatever. There was something different, right? So now what you've just done is you've opened up a portion of that stretch budget, not the whole thing, just take a small portion of it, and then double down on whatever that thing was. And now you've got more money to then reinvest in that thing that you can then spread around inside the organization, right? So that's the concept of where the stretch budget is, but the keys are: one, you negotiate it up front; two, you've got well-defined ways of accessing it, right? I'm only allowed to access it during this scenario; and three, that you don't take the whole thing at once, right? And that's then they'll give you data points to, one, say, we know what works. We've got data that makes it work. So when you go for your larger budgeting meeting, right, your annual or however you want to do your budgeting, you've now got data to say, listen, we did this. It worked. We doubled down. It worked again. Now let's scale this up to the next level, or whatever that may be. So that's what I'd suggest.
Yeah, and plus you're also proving the Agile model. If you're not currently using an Agile model, you're proving the value of the Agile model by doing that through the stretch. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and
great.
I'm going to go back to the word Agile. Agile's a massive word. So, people say, everyone will say they do Agile. If we ask, I think half the businesses say they do Agile. They don't, right? The reality is they understand the word, but there's massive differences. There's Agile organizational structure, which is a pod-based structure. That's super radical. Only a few companies are doing that. I know some companies who have transitioned their entire marketing organizations to an Agile pod structure. Mm-hmm. And when they did that, the biggest result was not like a percentage increase. It was simply the statement that we now produce the highest amount of work per unit of time. Right. Okay. That's at the far end. At the very easiest, anyone can just operate with an Agile mentality of getting something out the door quickly, testing it, and iterating. Right. So it's like a wide range of what Agile actually is. So just wanted to kind of toss it in there.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I also wanted to talk about we preach effective use of marketing automation. We work with a lot of clients in their marketing automation, and one of the things we see is we see so many organizations just misusing this, or really not using it past maybe a 1% potential of what they could get out of it. So I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about marketing automation in the context of the contextual marketing revolution.
Sure. So for people that don't know me, I was employee 13 at one of the premier marketing automation platforms called Pardot, which is now Salesforce's marketing automation platform. I wrote a book called Marketing Automation for Dummies, which published 7 years ago in 2013. It was the first practical guide to marketing automation. Just for context of what I'm about to tell you. Yeah. I've seen marketing automation for a long time, and here is the biggest problem. So when I wrote Marketing Automation for Dummies, it was the exact same scenario. People were getting the tool and not knowing what to do with it. And here's the reason why. Here's what you need to think about it. Most people saw the word automation and they think of efficiency. They say, all right, now I can take the crap I've been doing and just simply have it being done automatically. Right?
We've automated the crap, yes.
Right. That's the natural next step, right? It's like, all right, remove manual process from process. Rather than transcending and saying, what is now possible that wasn't possible before? Right? And that's the big difference, is most brands just simply say, I want to automate things without understanding it's a new reality and a new world of possibilities, and then rethinking all the different kinds of concepts, right? Like I would have to walk brands back from ideas like this. Well, great. We know that a hot prospect is someone that has read all 6 of these things, right? Content, whatever you want to call it, right? 6 of these things. So I want to create a program that sends all 6 of these things to somebody over a period of time when they engage, right? And I'm like, all right, that's really not a great idea, right? Like theoretically, I understand where you're coming from, but just automating sending things to people is not really the highest value of this, right? So, that was the hard part, is changing people's minds to see things differently. All right, so where does automation fit in terms of context marketing revolution? Here's where it fits. One of the big fundamental shifts that we have to go through is the shift from campaigns to perpetual systems, right? And that's one of the big things that organizations, that's one of the doors that automation opened up, was perpetual systems, right? And really where this kind of thinks about is to say, if I create a campaign has a spike, right? If it's good, it has a spike, right? That's a momentary spike. It is not a perpetual thing. It does not continue, right? You put a good campaign out in the world, there's a spike, but then it tails back down. A perpetual system goes up and continues and maintains, right? So that's what we need to think about from automation is, in this world of context, we're going to have a lot of different personas who are going to need a lot of very personal experiences.
Right.
The only way to scale this and make it a system of experiences is to use automation, right? And so that's kind of where these two worlds collide. So to your point, yes, a lot of people are going to use automation and they're going to fail with it. In fact, when you look at the data, most people don't see any return from marketing automation for a while. It's like usually 2 years. That's not the technology's fault. No. That's the implementation of that technology's fault. And that's usually because the people who implemented it with only this is going to remove my manual process, right? They didn't see the higher possible value.
It reminds me of back in 2007 when or 2008 when people say, "Oh yeah, we tried social media, it didn't really work." Okay, great.
Yeah,
I'm glad you tried.
But back to that same point, what did they try, right? What they tried was taking the same crap that they were doing and then distributing it for free, right? They only saw it as a one step, not a new possibility, right? They didn't see this as the highest value of direct connection, of decentralized community. They didn't see those things. They just saw free distribution. And when people didn't want the crap that they were distributing, then they say it doesn't work, rather than saying, how do we then find a system that works with this?
And it keeps in the... And the scenario keeps repeating itself through every new shiny object that comes out, as everybody wants to try old stuff on new platforms.
But that's the natural human nature. I mean, Marshall McLuhan wrote about that in the 60s. Essentially, anytime a new media format comes out, the content of the new media is the format of the old, right? We just simply take it and move it forward, right? So really good example. What was the number one format of social media up until this year, right? Posts. Now it's ephemeral content. Right. Now it's social. Now we're looking at a new world of social where it's not just a publishing platform. It's a new format of experience completely. Right. It took us a while to evolve from just simply publication to a new format of experience.
Right. Right. So speaking of new social experiences, we're recording this in the time of we're in the COVID era of craziness, and personally, I think your book couldn't have come at a better time, because I think it is a lesson for people to learn about how to act in a situation like this. So I'm wondering if you could talk about, if you have any tips for businesses, and this, I don't want to just get like, how do business market? How do businesses market in a pandemic? That's not what I want to ask. I just want to know, maybe if you could talk about how important context and the process that you lay out in your book is during a time like this, and how it could actually help a lot of organizations really pivot and survive something like this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was really funny, right? I've got this big book tour, been planning for, it's all over the world, and that blows up, and it's like, all right, great. What are you doing? Everyone's like, well, hey, why don't you tell me about, the scenario of this? And so I've been doing a lot of that. And I think the biggest lesson that brands can really learn is a couple of basic things. One is that most of us don't really understand what the current need of a moment is. And that's because most brands don't talk to people at the level and the way that they need to understand, right? So most brands essentially have cardboard cutouts of people with sticky notes on them. They've got they call it a psychographic and a demographic or geographic profile.
Right.
But they don't really talk to their customers on a regular or a very continual basis. That's the number one thing that you can be doing right now, right? Because needs are changing by the day. And if you are not sitting down talking with your customers on a weekly basis, step one, you're not going to know what their new needs are and how you fulfill them, right?
And number two, the key word is there is talking with your customers instead of talking to your customers.
Yeah, and I think then that's the next key I was going to go with, which is
Sorry.
then, yeah, no, you kind of transitioned it for me, John. So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
the next is this concept of with, not on, right?
Hmm.
Now you've got to find ways to work with people, not on people.
Right.
And so I was talking with an organization that does marketing for healthcare. Do you guys do healthcare stuff too? Or healthcare?
I don't know if we have any healthcare clients. I think we might.
This was like their main focus. Like they just did hospitals.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and the hospitals were saying, like, how do we get our message out to people and relate to them at this current point? I was like, well, hang on a second. Let's take a step back, right? That's on. Like, how do I create a
Yeah.
message to put on people, right? That's, once again, we're talking about a shift. So now reverse that and say, all right, look at your stakeholders, look at your community, and see
Mhm.
what's there and see what you have and how to connect those two things together, right? So all communities right now are work from home. Everyone's at home, which means children are at home and parents are going crazy, right? And so it's like,
Mhm.
that's not an exaggeration.
Mhm.
You've got that going on. Then you've got hospitals, which have two populations that are in dire need. One are the workers, two are the patients.
Right.
Patients' families can't come see them. The staff is overworked, and just their spirits are really down, right?
Right.
So let's find ways to connect those two groups together, right? Be the glue in between your community to say, all right, listen, let's create, and I'm just throwing out hypothetical ideas here, right? Let's create a story time every day at noon, right? So kids get structure every day at noon.
Mm.
There's an hour they can, at least parents can put their kids in front of something positive. And what that thing could be is there's 1,000 things you could do. You could allow them to tell jokes to the patients, right? It could be simply, you could even do Zoom sessions with patients where they can actually to see other people on the other side.
Right.
We have kids create cards for soldiers at wartime, right?
Right.
We could possibly think about doing something like that for the people that are inside the hospitals. But the point
Mhm.
is to find ways to work with your audience, not
Right.
on your audience. Because by doing that, one is they're engaging their actual community, the actual people who are going to need their hospital in the future. Two, they're doing the thing that they very well need to do for the patients, right? Getting them better emotionally, not just physically. And then
Mhm.
three, taking care of their staff, right? So it's stakeholder theory much more, so it's a with, not on concept. So I'd say those are the two biggest things I think
Yeah.
people can really think about. And then I'll add one more.
Sure.
The notion of personal, not personalized, right? And
Okay.
this
Yeah.
goes back to what is the highest benefit that we currently can derive from this connectivity, right? The internet, the highest value the internet gave us was not free distribution. It was
Mhm.
direct connection,
Mhm.
right? So if we focus on this and say, all right, how do we not just personalize things, how do we make them personal, right? How do we deliver them personally? That means, rethinking how you actually interact, the
Mhm.
roles that people have, like what are the goals? What is an automation? Is an automation send an email, or is it have this individual reach out to this person, right? Schedule
Right.
time on this person's calendar to actually physically reach out on this person, right? So I just throw that in there for you.
No, it's great advice, and it's so important because I'm seeing I'm seeing a lot of advice out there that's just I don't know. I just don't feel like it's people really taking full advantage of their team and their connection with their customers. It's more just here are different ways to advertise or here are different ways to kind of pitch to your clients. And I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see how it goes. So,
we shall see. Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, though there will be links to your book in the transcription and on the YouTube post. I really appreciate your time today. I can sit and talk to you for hours because this stuff is always fascinating to me. But the one thing I would tell people is get this book because it's good and it's relevant and it's now. So thank you again. I appreciate it, and that's all.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Yep.